The Beverly Hilton cover-up. On February 11, 2012, Whitney Houston was found dead in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Los Angeles. The official story was straightforward: accidental drowning with heart disease and cocaine as contributing factors. Case closed. But hotel staff who were present that day tell a different story, one that involves missing hours, inconsistent timelines, and pressure from hotel management to forget what they saw. A housekeeper who worked the fourth floor that weekend later described being ordered away from the area around Houston's suite, hours before the body was officially discovered. Security personnel were already present, she claimed, moving through the hallway with an urgency that didn't match the hotel's later statements. When she asked her supervisor what was happening, she was told to continue her work on another floor and to not discuss what she had seen with anyone. The official timeline stated that Houston was found by her personal assistant at approximately 3:55 p.m., but multiple staff members have claimed that unusual activity around the suite began much earlier, some estimates placing it as early as noon. Security footage from the fourth floor for that day has never been released publicly, despite requests from investigators and journalists. The hotel claimed the footage showed nothing relevant. Staff who reportedly viewed it before it was secured tell a different story. What hotel employees witnessed in the hours surrounding Houston's death remains disputed. Some have claimed they saw individuals leaving the suite who were never identified or interviewed by police. Others reported that hotel management conducted an internal cleaning of the scene before law enforcement arrived, a process that may have contaminated or removed evidence. One former security guard alleged that he was instructed to delay the notification of police while certain matters were handled upstairs. The Beverly Hilton has never addressed these allegations directly. Staff members who spoke to media in the weeks following Houston's death were terminated for violating confidentiality agreements. Those who remained employed stopped talking publicly. Settlement agreements with the Houston family reportedly included strict non-disclosure provisions that extended to hotel employees. The coroner's report was completed in remarkably quick fashion, and the investigation was closed without interviewing several potential witnesses identified by family members. The questions raised by hotel staff about the timeline, about the visitors, about what happened in those missing hours have never been officially answered. Several employees from that period have since left the hospitality industry entirely. In anonymous interviews conducted years later, some have hinted at knowledge they're still afraid to share publicly. The confidentiality agreements they signed have no expiration date. The legal consequences of speaking remain real. What's known is that Whitney Houston died in a luxury hotel suite, surrounded by people who were never identified, during hours that remain unaccounted for. The workers who might know more about her final hours were systematically silenced by the institution that was supposed to protect her. The Dominique Strauss-Kahn incident. On May 14, 2011, a housekeeper at the Sofitel Hotel in New York City entered Suite 2806 to clean the room. What happened next would become international news, but what hotel staff witnessed in the aftermath revealed how powerful men can manipulate institutions to escape accountability. Nafissatou Diallo alleged that Dominique Strauss-Kahn, then head of the International Monetary Fund and leading candidate for the French presidency, sexually assaulted her when she entered his suite. She reported the assault immediately to her supervisor, who escalated it to hotel security and then to police. Strauss-Kahn was arrested on an Air France flight minutes before takeoff, dramatically pulled from first class and taken into custody. For a brief moment, it appeared that even one of the world's most powerful men would face justice for his alleged crimes. Then, the machinery of protection began to operate. Hotel staff later described pressure from multiple directions. French diplomatic contacts reached out to Sofitel's parent company, the French hospitality giant Accor. Calls came from powerful figures in French politics and business. Strauss-Kahn's legal team, assembled within hours, began investigating Diallo's background with resources that dwarfed anything available to prosecutors. Within weeks, the narrative shifted from a powerful man's alleged crime to questions about the victim's credibility. What hotel employees witnessed during this period was instructive. Security personnel reported being approached by individuals asking detailed questions about Diallo's work history and personal life. Staff members who had supported Diallo's account, who had seen her immediately after the alleged assault, visibly shaken and distressed, began receiving unwanted attention. Private investigators appeared at their homes. The institutional support that had initially backed her complaint began to waver under the pressure. The criminal case was eventually dropped, with prosecutors citing concerns about Diallo's credibility, concerns that had been manufactured and amplified by a sophisticated public relations operation funded by Strauss-Kahn's wealthy supporters. He walked free, his political career damaged, but his liberty intact. But hotel staff knew what had happened. Diallo's initial report had been consistent and immediate, exactly what training told them to look for in a genuine assault complaint. Multiple employees had observed Strauss-Kahn's demeanor before and after the incident. The physical evidence and timeline supported her account. None of this mattered once the protection machinery engaged. Diallo later reached a settlement in a civil suit against Strauss-Kahn, the terms of which remain confidential. Other women subsequently came forward with similar allegations against him, suggesting a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond that single hotel suite. The housekeeper who tried to report a crime in the moment it happened found herself destroyed by the investigation into her own life, while her alleged attacker faced no criminal consequences. The Sofitel staff learned what hotel employees worldwide already knew. Reporting crimes by powerful guests carries enormous professional and personal risk, and the institution will not protect you when the pressure comes. The Las Vegas Massacre Mystery. On October 1, 2017, Stephen Paddock opened fire from his suite at the Mandalay Bay Hotel in Las Vegas, killing 60 people and wounding over 400 in the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history. The investigation that followed was the largest in FBI history, yet hotel employees who interacted with Paddock in the days before the massacre tell stories that have never been officially explained, and raise questions about what the hotel knew and when. Housekeeping staff who serviced Paddock's suite reported that he had placed a "Do Not Disturb" sign on his door for most of his 4-day stay. This wasn't unusual for high-roller guests, so no one investigated further. But when housekeepers did enter the room on occasions when Paddock left briefly, they noticed luggage, lots of it, far more than any normal guest would bring for a weekend stay. Suitcases stacked around the room in numbers that should have raised questions. One housekeeper later told investigators that she had counted at least 10 large suitcases in the suite during a brief entry 3 days before the shooting. She mentioned this to her supervisor as unusual, but was told that high-roller guests sometimes traveled with extensive wardrobes. No one checked what was actually in the bags. No one questioned why a retired accountant needed 10 suitcases for a Vegas weekend. A room service attendant who delivered food to Paddock in the days before the shooting later described him as nervous and evasive, keeping the door barely cracked and paying in cash despite having hotel accounts that would have allowed him to simply sign. The attendant reported his observations to a supervisor, noting that the guest seemed off in a way that was hard to articulate. Apparently, no action was taken. Security personnel have described gaps in the official timeline that have never been reconciled. The hotel initially stated that security guard Jesus Campos was shot by Paddock at 9:59 p.m., 6 minutes before the mass shooting began at 10:05 p.m. This timeline was later revised multiple times, with the hotel and law enforcement offering contradictory accounts that have never been fully explained. At one point, the timeline suggested Campos was shot during the massacre. Then it changed again. Campos himself was scheduled to appear on multiple media outlets to tell his story, then abruptly canceled all appearances. He resurfaced days later for a single interview on Ellen DeGeneres' talk show, an unusual venue for a key witness in a mass murder investigation, where he answered few substantive questions and provided little new information. He has not spoken publicly since. What hotel staff witnessed in the investigation's aftermath was equally troubling. Employees who spoke to media were quickly transferred or terminated. Internal communications about the security response were classified and never released. The hotel reached a massive settlement with victims, reported to be approximately $800 million, that included provisions limiting future litigation and disclosure. Multiple housekeepers and security personnel have claimed, through attorneys and in anonymous interviews, that they observed things in the days before the shooting that should have raised alarms, things they reported through proper channels that were not acted upon. These claims have never been officially investigated or publicly addressed. MGM Resorts, which owns Mandalay Bay, deployed an aggressive legal strategy to contain liability and limit disclosure. The settlement was specifically structured to prevent public trial testimony that might have revealed what hotel staff knew and when they knew it. Whatever hotel employees witnessed, both before and after the massacre, remains largely hidden behind those legal walls. The Saudi Royal Suite. In 2017, a housekeeper at a luxury hotel in Los Angeles entered a penthouse suite occupied by a member of the Saudi royal family and witnessed something that would haunt her for years. A young woman, clearly distressed, was being held in a back room. Her eyes were red from crying. When the housekeeper made eye contact with her, the woman mouthed what appeared to be a plea for help before someone pulled her back from view. The housekeeper reported what she saw to her supervisor immediately, describing the woman's apparent distress and her silent plea. The supervisor escalated to hotel security, who contacted the police. For a moment, it seemed like the system was working. Then diplomatic reality intervened. Police arrived and requested access to the suite. They were denied entry. The guests claimed diplomatic immunity, producing credentials that the officers couldn't challenge. Consular officials from the Saudi Arabian embassy appeared within hours, remarkably fast response time, to confirm his protected status. The police were forced to leave without investigating, without speaking to the woman, without even verifying her presence or well-being. The housekeeper was called into a meeting with hotel management the next day. She was informed that her observations had been misinterpreted and that the guest was a valued client with a long history at the property. She was reminded firmly of the confidentiality provisions in her employment contract. She was offered a bonus for her discretion, a sum large enough to make clear that this was not a suggestion. When she refused to sign a document stating she had been mistaken about what she witnessed, her employment situation changed immediately. She was written up for minor infractions that had previously been ignored. Her schedule was changed to undesirable shifts. Within 2 weeks, she was terminated for performance issues that had never been mentioned before. The young woman she saw was never identified. No investigation was ever conducted. The Saudi guest departed on a private aircraft the following day, beyond the reach of any American law enforcement. Whatever was happening in that suite, whatever that woman was silently begging for help to escape, remained hidden behind diplomatic immunity. This housekeeper's story is not unique. Hotel employees who work properties frequented by foreign diplomats and royal families describe a two-tier system of justice that operates openly. Guests with diplomatic immunity cannot be arrested, detained, or even meaningfully questioned by American police. Whatever happens in their suites stays in their suites, regardless of how many witnesses see it. Workers have described witnessing what appeared to be domestic violence, human trafficking, and assault, all hidden behind the shield of diplomatic immunity and the hotel's financial incentive to maintain relationships with ultra-wealthy clients. Reporting these incidents accomplishes nothing except ending the employee's career and potentially exposing them to legal retaliation. The housekeeper who tried to help the young woman in Los Angeles later contacted journalists and human rights organizations. Without identifying information about the victim, there was nothing anyone could do. The crime she witnessed remains uninvestigated, the victim's fate unknown, and the perpetrator protected by international law and institutional complicity. The Chateau Marmont deaths. The Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles has been a haven for celebrities since the 1930s. If you must get into trouble, do it at the Chateau Marmont, Columbia Pictures boss Harry Cohn reportedly advised his stars. For nearly a century, celebrities have taken that advice. The hotel has also been the site of numerous deaths, overdoses, and incidents that hotel staff have witnessed but rarely discussed. The property's legendary discretion has protected guests for decades, but that same discretion has allowed crimes to go unreported and deaths to remain uninvestigated. John Belushi died of a drug overdose at the Chateau in Bungalow 3 on March 5, 1982. In the hours before his death, hotel staff observed multiple people visiting his bungalow at unusual hours, some of whom were known in entertainment circles as drug dealers and suppliers. Belushi's deteriorating condition was visible to employees who interacted with him. When his situation became critical, there were delays in calling for medical assistance, delays that staff members later attributed to confusion about how to handle a celebrity medical emergency without attracting attention. The woman who injected Belushi with the fatal speedball, Kathy Smith, walked out of the hotel that night and wasn't arrested for over a year. Hotel staff who had seen her enter and leave the bungalow multiple times were not initially interviewed by police. The Chateau's policy of protecting guest privacy apparently extended to protecting those who had contributed to a guest's death. Smith eventually served 15 months in prison after pleading no contest to involuntary manslaughter, a light sentence that critics attributed to the passage of time and faded memories. This pattern has repeated throughout the hotel's history. Helmut Newton, the legendary fashion photographer, died after crashing his car leaving the Chateau in January 2004. Staff members later described concerns about his condition before he departed. He seemed disoriented, possibly impaired. Those concerns weren't acted upon. No one suggested he shouldn't drive. The Chateau's culture of non-interference extended even to situations where intervention might have saved a life. Fashion photographer Davide Sorrenti overdosed at the hotel in 1997 at age 20. His death later connected to the heroin-chic aesthetic he helped popularize. Employees who witnessed warning signs in the days before his death, the visitors, the behavior, the physical deterioration, were never asked to provide statements to investigators. Current and former employees describe a culture where guest privacy supersedes safety concerns. Staff are trained to be invisible, to notice nothing publicly, to report nothing externally. When incidents occur, the response prioritizes containing information over investigating what happened. The question isn't, what did we see, but how do we ensure no one finds out? Multiple lawsuits have been filed against the Chateau over the years, alleging negligence in various incidents. Most have been settled with strict confidentiality provisions. The employees who witnessed these incidents, who could provide crucial testimony about what happened and what the hotel knew, are bound by employment agreements that prohibit disclosure. The Chateau Marmont's mystique depends on its discretion. That discretion has protected celebrities from embarrassment for nearly a century, but it has also protected behavior that crosses into criminality, allowed preventable deaths to occur without accountability, and silenced the workers who see everything from speaking about anything. The Jeffrey Epstein hotels. Jeffrey Epstein's crimes are now well documented. The trafficking, the abuse, the network of powerful enablers who protected him for decades. What's less discussed is the role of luxury hotels in facilitating his operation, and what hotel staff witnessed during his stays at properties around the world. Employees at hotels in New York, Paris, and the Caribbean have described seeing Epstein arrive with young women who appeared uncomfortable or frightened. The women were often very young, clearly teenagers in some cases, and traveled separately from Epstein, arriving shortly after him, or being escorted by assistants. Housekeepers reported finding evidence of multiple people sleeping in rooms where Epstein was the only registered guest. Beds were used that shouldn't have been occupied. Bathroom supplies were depleted faster than one person could account for. Concierges described arranging transportation for young women who arrived separately from Epstein and departed under what seemed like supervision, always accompanied, never alone. Front desk staff noticed that these women rarely spoke directly to hotel personnel, that their interactions were managed by Epstein's assistants, that they seemed nervous or afraid. When staff reported these observations to management, the responses followed a pattern. They were thanked for their vigilance and assured that security would look into the matter. Nothing visible happened. Epstein continued to book suites at the same properties, continued to bring young women, continued to operate in plain sight of dozens of hotel employees. One former hotel security director, speaking anonymously to journalists after Epstein's arrest, described being explicitly instructed to treat Epstein as a VIP who requires maximum privacy. Complaints or concerns from staff about his behavior were to be documented internally, but never reported to law enforcement. The hotel's relationship with Epstein, who spent lavishly and brought other wealthy clients, was too valuable to jeopardize with uncomfortable questions. The pattern extended internationally. Hotel employees in Paris described similar observations during Epstein's frequent stays there. Staff at Caribbean resorts noticed the constant traffic of young women to and from his island, and to the hotels where he stayed on other islands. Employees at New York properties saw the same patterns repeated over years, sometimes decades. Everywhere Epstein went, hotel workers saw what was happening. Their observations were systematically ignored. After Epstein's arrest in 2019, investigators contacted several hotels seeking records and witness statements. Many hotels claimed their records from the relevant periods had been purged according to standard retention policies. Convenient timing that prevented reconstruction of Epstein's activities. Employees who might have provided testimony had left the industry, moved away, or signed separation agreements that discouraged disclosure. The hospitality industry's complicity in Epstein's crimes has never been fully investigated. No hotel has faced meaningful consequences for the institutional blindness that allowed him to traffic young women through their properties for decades. The workers who saw everything and were systematically prevented from doing anything about it remain largely unheard. The Crown Casino Scandal. For years, staff at Crown Casino resorts in Australia witnessed crimes that should have been impossible to miss. High roller guests from China were laundering massive sums through the casino, and the methods were anything but subtle. Yet employees who raised concerns were ignored, transferred, or terminated. Because the criminal guests were generating hundreds of millions in revenue, the scheme was straightforward. Chinese nationals would arrive at Crown properties in Melbourne and Perth with no apparent source of legitimate wealth. They would gamble enormous sums, sometimes millions of dollars in a single visit. They would receive credit from the casino without proper verification of their funds' origins. And the money they brought was obviously dirty, flowing from sources that no legitimate bank would touch. Hotel and casino staff saw all of this happening in real time. Housekeepers reported finding rooms filled with cash, stacks of bills sitting openly on tables and beds, far more money than any legitimate tourist would carry. Security personnel observed guests meeting with known organized crime figures in hotel bars and restaurants, conducting what appeared to be business discussions. Concierge were asked to arrange services that were obviously connected to criminal activity. Private jets, discreet transportation, meetings in unusual locations. When employees reported these observations through proper channels, they were told that the guests were VIPs who should not be disturbed or questioned. Staff who persisted in raising concerns found themselves reassigned to less desirable shifts or transferred to distant properties. Some were terminated for fabricated performance issues. The message was clear: see nothing, say nothing, keep your job. One former dealer described watching a guest lose $20 million in a single session, then return the next night with another $20 million in cash. When he asked his supervisor where such money could possibly come from, he was told it wasn't his concern. When he raised the question again with compliance staff, he was warned that his questions were unwelcome. He left Crown shortly after, unwilling to participate in what he recognized as money laundering. The Crown scandal only became public when journalists and regulators finally investigated in 2020, after years of willful blindness by the institutions that should have been watching. A Royal Commission inquiry found that Crown had systematically facilitated money laundering, maintained relationships with individuals connected to organized crime, and created a culture where revenue from any source was welcome regardless of its origins. The company's licenses were suspended or subjected to conditions in multiple jurisdictions. Executives lost their positions. The findings made international headlines. But the employees who had witnessed these crimes for years received no vindication. Many had left the industry entirely, their careers damaged by their attempts to report what they saw. Those who remained employed learned to stay silent about anything that might threaten the bottom line. The whistleblowers who might have exposed the scheme years earlier had been systematically eliminated from the organization. Crown Casino paid fines and faced regulatory action, but no one went to prison for the money laundering that staff witnessed for years. The hotel workers who could have exposed the scheme, who tried to expose the scheme, were silenced by the very institution that was profiting from the crimes. The Dubai labor trafficking. The luxury hotels of Dubai are built and serviced by a workforce drawn largely from South Asia and Southeast Asia. These workers operate under conditions that international observers have described as modern slavery. Passports confiscated by employers, wages withheld for months, housed in crowded labor camps far from the gleaming properties where they work, and legally unable to leave the country without employer permission. Hotel staff, who are themselves victims of this system, have witnessed even worse crimes committed against the most vulnerable among them. A former housekeeping supervisor at a five-star Dubai property described seeing colleagues collapse from exhaustion and heat exposure during the brutal summer months when temperatures exceed 110 degrees. When workers fell ill, they were often denied medical care and threatened with deportation if they couldn't perform their duties. Those who complained about conditions, about unpaid wages, about confiscated documents, about impossible workloads, were told their contracts would be terminated and they would be blacklisted from the entire Gulf hospitality industry. But the most serious crimes involved workers who attempted to escape the system entirely. One housekeeper described a colleague, a young woman from the Philippines, who had been promised a job in hospitality but found herself forced into domestic servitude for a wealthy Emirati family connected to the hotel's ownership. When she escaped after months of abuse and sought help at the hotel where she had expected to work, security personnel detained her and returned her to the family that had been holding her captive. The housekeeper who witnessed this was warned explicitly that any discussion of the incident would result in her own deportation and blacklisting. She remained silent for years, until after she had left Dubai and returned to her home country. Sexual assault of workers by both supervisors and guests is endemic in Dubai's hospitality industry, according to human rights organizations and worker testimonies gathered over years of investigation. The legal system offers little protection. Workers who report sexual assault can themselves be charged with adultery or extramarital sex under UAE law. Hotel management has every incentive to suppress these reports, and workers have every reason to stay silent even when they're the victims. Western hotel brands that operate properties in Dubai have been criticized for their complicity in this system. Their logos hang on buildings staffed by workers whose fundamental rights are systematically violated. When journalists or activists raise concerns, the companies point to contractual arrangements with local partners that supposedly insulate them from responsibility for labor conditions. The exploitation continues behind the facade of five-star service. The hotel workers who witness these crimes are themselves trapped in the system. Speaking out means losing their jobs, being deported, potentially facing legal consequences in countries that criminalize victims rather than perpetrators, and being blacklisted from future employment in an industry that spans the globe. Their silence is compelled by circumstances, not chosen freely. The tourists who stay in Dubai's luxury hotels see gleaming lobbies and attentive service. They don't see the labor camps where workers sleep 8 to a room. They don't see the confiscated passports locked in employer safes. They don't see the withheld wages or the impossible debt structures that keep workers trapped for years. They don't see the crimes that hotel staff witness but can never report. The Beverly Hills Hotel secrets. The Beverly Hills Hotel, the Pink Palace, has hosted the world's elite for over a century. Its bungalows have sheltered stars, presidents, and billionaires seeking privacy for activities they couldn't pursue anywhere else. Hotel staff have witnessed decades of behavior that ranges from merely eccentric to clearly criminal, all protected by the hotel's legendary discretion and the mutual understanding that what happens at the Beverly Hills Hotel stays at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Former employees have described what happens when that discretion becomes complicity in serious crimes. A longtime server recalled being instructed to avoid certain bungalows during specific hours because guests were conducting private business. That business often involved young women who arrived through back entrances and departed before dawn, women who were never registered as guests and whose presence was never officially acknowledged. Staff understood what was happening. They were paid generously to not understand. A former security guard described responding to noise complaints from bungalows occupied by A-list celebrities and finding clear evidence of domestic violence, broken furniture, holes in walls, visible injuries on partners who claimed they were fine. He reported these incidents to management, who instructed him to document them internally but never contact police. The celebrity guests were too valuable. their potential embarrassment too costly, their lawyers too aggressive. The victims received no assistance from the hotel that could have helped them. Housekeeping staff have found drugs, weapons, and evidence of crimes in guest rooms over the decades. Standard procedure was to clean around these items, pretend they didn't exist, and never report them to anyone outside hotel management. Guests at the Beverly Hills Hotel have an expectation of privacy that extends to illegal activities. Employees who violated this expectation, who reported what they found to police or spoke to media, didn't remain employed for long. The hotel's ownership by the Sultan of Brunei has added another layer of controversy in recent years. Brunei's adoption of strict Sharia law, including death penalty provisions for homosexuality and adultery, prompted boycott calls in 2014 and 2019. Celebrity advocates urged people to avoid the hotel. What received less attention was how the ownership structure further insulated the property from accountability for incidents that occurred there. Former staff describe a culture where guest satisfaction supersedes all other concerns, including employee safety and legal obligations. Workers who witness crimes must weigh reporting against losing their jobs, being blacklisted from the industry, and potentially facing legal retaliation from wealthy guests with armies of lawyers. Most choose silence. Most have families to support. The Beverly Hills Hotel has never faced meaningful legal consequences for any incident that occurred on its property, despite rumors that have circulated for decades about what happens in the bungalows. The staff who witness these events are bound by confidentiality agreements, trained in the art of discretion and acutely aware that their careers depend on seeing nothing, remembering nothing, and saying nothing to anyone outside the pink walls. The Ritz Paris incident. In August 1997, Princess Diana spent her final hours at the Ritz Paris before departing in a Mercedes that crashed in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, killing her, Dodi Fayed, and driver Henry Paul. The hotel was owned by Dodi's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed, who would spend years claiming that his son and Diana were murdered in a conspiracy involving the British royal family and intelligence services. But hotel staff who were present that night tell a story that has never been fully examined. A story not of conspiracy, but of institutional failures that cost Diana her life. Henry Paul, the acting security manager who drove the fatal vehicle, had been drinking that evening, a fact the hotel initially denied, then was forced to acknowledge when toxicology reports showed his blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit. But employees who worked that night have described seeing Paul consume alcohol at the hotel bar over several hours, behavior that should have immediately disqualified him from driving duties. Why was an intoxicated security manager assigned to transport the most famous woman in the world? Staff also described the chaotic scene as dozens of paparazzi surrounded the hotel, and the improvised plan to deceive them by having Diana and Dodi depart from a rear entrance while a decoy vehicle left from the front. This plan was developed quickly, without proper security protocols, under enormous pressure to get Diana away from the photographers who were making her evening miserable. Employees who observed the preparations expressed concerns about the vehicle selection, a Mercedes that wasn't part of the hotel's regular fleet, and about Henry Paul's condition. Those concerns were dismissed by managers who were focused solely on executing the departure quickly. The French investigation into the crash concluded it was an accident caused by Henry Paul's intoxication and reckless driving while being pursued by paparazzi. The British inquest reached a verdict of unlawful killing due to grossly negligent driving by Paul and the pursuing photographers. Neither investigation fully explored the decisions made at the Ritz that put Diana in that particular car with that particular driver at that particular moment. Hotel employees who were present that night have been reluctant to speak publicly, even decades later. The Al-Fayed family's control of the property meant that anyone who contradicted the official narrative or confirmed it in ways that embarrassed the hotel's management faced professional consequences. The conspiracy theories that Mohammed Al-Fayed promoted for years further complicated any attempt at honest accounting by creating a false choice between murder by MI6 and nothing to see here. What staff witnessed was a series of mundane failures that added up to tragedy. An impaired driver assigned to a critical task because he was the ranking security officer present. A hasty plan developed under pressure without proper vetting. Security protocols abandoned in the chaos of the moment. Concerns raised by subordinates and dismissed by superiors who didn't want to hear problems. These failures contributed to the death of a princess. But the institutional power of the hotel, combined with the Al Fayed family's focus on conspiracy theories and the media's appetite for dramatic narratives, has obscured the simpler and more troubling truth. People at the Ritz made decisions that night that cost Diana her life, and the employees who witnessed those decisions have never been given a proper forum to describe what they saw. These 10 cases reveal an uncomfortable truth about the hospitality industry. Luxury hotels operate as zones of impunity for the powerful. The same discretion that protects celebrity guests from embarrassment also protects criminals from consequences. The same confidentiality that makes exclusive hotels attractive to the wealthy makes them dangerous for the vulnerable. Hotel staff occupy a unique position in society. They see everything: the drugs, the violence, the exploitation, the crimes, but they are paid to see nothing. Their livelihoods depend on silence. Their employers have every incentive to maintain the discretion that attracts wealthy guests and every reason to suppress information that might drive them away. The entire business model depends on the staff's willingness to forget what they witness. The workers who tried to speak up in these cases learned harsh lessons about how the system protects itself. Housekeepers who reported concerns were terminated for pretextual reasons. Security guards who documented incidents found themselves transferred to undesirable assignments. Witnesses who spoke to media faced lawsuits and legal threats. The machinery of protection isn't subtle. It's explicit, systematic, and remarkably effective at silencing those who might expose what happens behind closed doors. This creates a moral hazard that extends far beyond any individual hotel. The wealthy and powerful know that luxury hotels offer privacy for activities that wouldn't be tolerated elsewhere. They know that staff are trained to be invisible and silent. They know that management will protect valuable clients from embarrassment and exposure, even when that protection enables serious crimes. This knowledge shapes behavior. It makes crimes more likely to occur because the perpetrators know they're unlikely to face consequences. The victims of this system are multiple and varied. The young women trafficked through hotel rooms by predators like Jeffrey Epstein. The domestic violence victims whose injuries were documented by security guards who were forbidden to call police. The workers exploited by guests who faced no consequences for their abuse. The families who never learned the full truth about what happened to their loved ones in hotel suites. The employees who carry knowledge of crimes they were forbidden to report, who live with the weight of what they witnessed and couldn't stop. Some of these cases eventually became public through lawsuits, investigative journalism, or official investigations that couldn't be completely suppressed. But for every story that emerges, countless others remain hidden behind confidentiality agreements and employment contracts. The witnesses stay silent because they have no choice. The crimes stay secret because secrecy is what luxury hotels sell. The hotel industry depends on trust, guests trusting that their privacy will be protected. Employers trusting that staff will be discreet, everyone trusting that what happens in the suite stays in the suite. But when that trust becomes a shield for criminality, when discretion becomes complicity, something has gone fundamentally wrong with an industry that exists to serve people. The workers who witnessed these crimes deserved better from the institutions that employed them. The victims who suffered these crimes deserved justice that was denied them. And the public deserves to know that the luxury hotels we admire and aspire to visit are, in too many cases, operating as sanctuaries for the worst behavior of the most powerful people. 10 cases, 10 hotels, 10 sets of employees who saw things they were paid to forget. The staff saw everything they were paid to forget. But some memories refuse to stay buried, and some witnesses eventually find the courage to speak.